It's good to see your faces. How are you guys? Let's do this first. One of my favorite sayings is success is a conscious choice, right? And so is happiness, so is joy. So you guys made a choice to be here today. You actually made a choice. You could be so many other places, I'm sure. So pick your right hand up. That's this hand. And wrap it around and say, good choice for being here. And pat the person's back next to you and say, good choice for being here. I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a really, really long time. Like, I've been speaking for a long time in really big groups. So this is not new for me. But I got in my head big time after going after Christy. I'm like, they're going to be watching my face the whole time. They're going to be watching my body movements. And listen, I've been working with Christy for like 8 years. So I'm always, when I go on stage, it's always, okay, feet together, right? Don't lean forward because that's desperation and you're always leaning forward and they're going to lean back. So put your chin back and your shoulders back and walk like this, right? Yes. Should put you on the plumb line, right? So you get on this plumb line and like you gotta get on the plumb line because I'm like this and you can see my face and I'm like this and I'm sensitive, so I'll watch your face, and if you're not interested and you check out, then I start to freak out, and I'm like, I'm not good enough. So it was pretty weird, like me sitting in that chair, because I just come in and I'm like, here we go, you know, I'm doing another event and speaking again, and then Christy went and I got so in my head. And the first thing my wife said when she came in is, you're in your head. And I'm like, yeah, feel my hands. And she's like, what happened? And I go, Christy spoke. No, Christy is so awesome. But you can see, like, I want to talk to you today a little bit about adversity. And really coming from a place of not survival, but thriving. I've spent the last 21 years helping people go from a place of survival to thriving. And not just positive thinking, but really thriving in an environment where they've struggled, where there's adversity. And big time adversity. And I've had my own adversities. Listen, I've had severe anxiety and panic disorder throughout my entire life. In my late 20s, I struggled with agoraphobia. Like, I had a panic attack a day for 3 years. So I decided to go nowhere. So I stayed in my house and I became agoraphobic. I've had numerous business adaptions throughout the years. 21 years of this, we've had to adapt numerous times. We've had many adversities throughout business. I think about 2007, 2008. Like, anybody remember those days? When there was this financial crash and how we had to adapt there. We had to recently adapt with COVID. Like 2019, we came back from an event that we did, a relationship event we did in Arizona. And we were doing 2 events a month for the last 21 years. And we came home in March and COVID said, no more, like, you're done. We had to completely adapt our business. Major adversity. We went from 9 employees to 2 overnight. So we've had to adapt business-wise big time. I've had relationship adversities. Look at my wife's face. Raise your hand, Michelle. Look at her face. Look, you see her face? You see that face? You see the jawline? You see the square jawline? You see how she's like, she's a badass warrior. But now look at mine. Inverted triangle, right? So all she has to do is look at me and I'm in the corner in tears, right? She is a warrior. And she helped me so much with the last adversity that I think is my biggest one. And it was 2019, I got a phone call that said, you have cancer. And my certainty in that moment completely went away. And I curled up in a ball for 6 days and couldn't move. And it really wasn't my certainty taken. I know that now, but I felt that in that moment. Like, if you ever want complete uncertainty, it's wondering where your health is going to be and whether you're going to be alive in a time frame. This woman was an absolute warrior through what I went through and the struggles that I went through. And that square jaw, you can see, like, she's like, fuck this, we're going to conquer this thing. We are going to take this thing on. We are going to kill it. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here today. So I appreciate that. Hopefully nobody got offended by my language. I'll use it here and there. But that's my latest adversity. So my question is, what I wanted to learn is, how do heroes take on adversity? Like, I saw the kids in the cancer wards that have no hair, and they're like, life is awesome. And I'm like paralyzed. I'm like, how do I become like that? Or you see the people who lose millions of dollars, and they're like, I'll just get it again. I'll recreate it. How do those people take on life? You ever wonder that? You guys ever wonder, how do people deal with adversities like that? Because I wasn't necessarily that person. And I realized that heroes, or Jessica talked about the hero's journey earlier, which I want to talk a lot about, this hero's path. Heroes and leaders, great leaders, they take on adversities different than other people, don't they? I just noticed my feet. I'm like, giving it out. Please like me. Where was I? Hero's journey. Yes, thank you. And I wanted to know what these people did. Like, how do they live? How do they become this? They overcome these adversities with such grace and triumph and just beauty. And so I researched and I researched and I researched. And I want to ask you a question. How do you take on adversities? And maybe a more important question is, how do you want to? So I'm going to go through what I find the 5 key elements to the hero's or the leader's path to taking on adversity at a whole other level, at a whole other place. Like, what do these great people do? And there are 5 components. And here's the thing. It's all of our story. And it's through every single story that we see these 5 components. So whether it's fictional, whether it's non-fictional, it doesn't matter. It's the story that's been told. I think Joseph Campbell called it the monomyth, right? The hero's journey. It's all of our stories. But what do these heroes or these great people, what do they do? What do they take on? What are the 5 elements that they take on? And the first thing that they all do is they look at the challenge and they see the challenge. Now, here's the thing. Everybody says no to the challenge first, right? You think about every story that has ever been told, fiction, nonfiction, they look at their challenge and they say no to it. You got the wrong person, I'm not strong enough, I can't take it on, I can't do it. How many of you have said no to a challenge? Like, you're like, nope, I'm not doing this one. Or you've even preemptively said, I'm not willing to go down that path. Like, I want growth, but please let me choose it. How many of you have ever done that? Yeah, so they say no to the challenge, and here's why they say no to the challenge. It's because brain has one thing that it's focused on above all else. What does brain want to do more than anything else? What's its job? Survival, right? It's not to make us happy. It's not to create success. It's to create survival. So then brain starts to negotiate when we get uncomfortable. How many of you know you negotiate with your brain? I'll give you an example of negotiation. A few years ago, I did a program with a man by the name of Wim Hof. Do you guys know who Wim Hof is? The Iceman. And his program was brand new. I mean, it was like, he just did a podcast with Joe Rogan. I'm like, I got to do this. The Iceman's this guy that said, hey, you incorporate cold into your life, and it completely alters things for you. So he'd get encapsulated with ice, and they'd inject him with cobra poisoning. He'd climb Mount Everest in a pair of shorts twice. And he really utilized cold to really assist not only in mental, but in this physical realm to help strengthen his body and strengthen his mind. So I'm like, I got to do the Wim Hof program. So the Wim Hof program, the first part of the Wim Hof program is you got to do a 30-second cold shower. And then you go up to a minute, then you go to 3 minutes, and then you go to 5 minutes, and then you're eventually taking ice baths. Anybody done this?
I tried.
You tried, yes. Because here's what happens. The brain goes, I am not getting uncomfortable. If you want to see brain negotiates when you try to take a cold shower. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, it's a 30-second cold shower, no big deal, right? So get into the cold shower, or taking a hot shower, and I go to turn the cold on, and I step away. And my brain goes, we're not doing this. And I'm like, brain, this is the Wim Hof program. Like, we got to do this program. We just invested this money. We got to do this thing. And brain's like, I don't think so. Why don't we put an arm in, right? So I put an arm in, and I'm like, brain, come on. We got to do more than this. It's more than an arm. We got to put our whole bodies in. We just invested in this program. We got to do this thing. And brain's like, how about an arm and a leg, right? And starts the negotiation. How many of you know your brain negotiates? Yes. So I'm like, brain, like, we got to do this thing. We just invested this money. We got to grow and learn and do this great thing so that we can, like, adapt this cold, and then we can go incorporate it in our lives. And brain goes, okay, I got an idea. Why don't we start this in July? Because it's December in Salt Lake City, right? And I'm like, brain, we got to do this thing. So finally I get my brain to get on board, and I do the Wim Hof challenge, and I take 30-second cold showers for a week, then a minute, then 3, then 5. Then it's ice baths. And to this day, it's something I do every single day. I do a cold plunge, and in the summer I do ice or cold showers. And it's dramatically impacted my life. It's been one of my greatest experiences. But brain wanted to negotiate it. I'm curious with you guys, what are some of the greatest experiences of your life? Like, what are the 3 greatest experiences of your life? 3 greatest. I like to find out like a moment. Like, what's an experience? Like a moment that was like one of those moments with your children. Being on the beach with your children. Okay, yeah?
Seeing my son's first reaction when we went to Disneyland and seeing his favorite character.
Okay. Seeing his favorite character, which was? Mickey. Okay, all right. What else? Greatest experiences?
Standing on a bridge in Multnomah Waterfall, looking out over like Washington, Oregon, and just realizing how small it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. How many of you was giving birth? Like, giving birth, greatest experience. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Mine was climbing a waterfall with a bunch of random people in Jamaica.
Climbing.
We all had to hold each other's hands too.
So you had to depend on strangers to climb this waterfall in Jamaica. Yeah. What else? Greatest experiences. Greatest experiences.
It was interesting. I learned how to do the flying trapeze, and I did it successfully with an assistant. You know, at the end when we captured and swing over their arms. Never done it before, so one day it was interesting, but it felt like quite an accomplishment.
The flying trapeze. So you're literally flying from, like, you're going back and forth, like the circus kind of thing. Wow. Okay.
And with like upside down and all the tricks on the bar and everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Great example. What else? Greatest experiences.
Riding a camel in the Sahara Desert.
Riding a camel in the Sahara Desert. Yeah. With how much water? What else? Greatest experiences. Go for it.
Racing my thoroughbred that I rehabilitated from a broken soul to a thriving horse.
Yeah.
With no reins in the water.
Wow. No reins in
Nothing.
the water.
Just him and I.
Wow. Okay. That sounds cool. Yeah.
And Multnomah. We're from Portland.
Yeah.
Walking for my master's degree and catching my children.
Wow. Yeah.
Mine's kind of different, but doing a medicine journey and thinking it's kind of like rocket launch me to God. But in the medicine journey, actually being in what I would call hell and agony and being all the judgments I've ever had was honestly probably the greatest experience I've ever had.
Yeah. So the thing that could kill you in that moment and you got face to face with death was one of your greatest experiences. Yeah. So what do all these things have in common? They all have uncertainty. They all have massive amounts of fear. Nobody said, oh, it was that time that I was sitting by a fire, it was snowing outside, I had a cup of coffee, and I read a book. Now that might sound really nice, but that's comfort, right? So brain's desire to keep you comfortable is not going to necessarily say yes to the challenge, right? We have to be willing to step into the discomfort. In fact, I would go as far as to say your quality of life, literally your quality of life is in direct proportion to the amount of discomfort your brain is willing to tolerate. That's good. You might want to write that down.
Can you say that again?
The quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of discomfort that your brain is willing to tolerate. Because it doesn't want to tolerate a lot. It wants to be comfortable. It wants to be safe. It wants to be secure, right? So the amount of discomfort that your brain's willing to tolerate is where your success comes from. It's where your joy comes from. Now, here's the next. So that step one is accepting the challenge, especially the challenge of discomfort. Step two is taking the road of trials. Now, the road of trials is an interesting place. That's the actual place where we get on the challenge and we actually do it. And if you think about any story of any person, nonfiction, fictional, this is where they go on the journey. I'm thinking about this. Some of you will love this analogy, and some of you will think it's the stupidest thing in the world, but think about Luke Skywalker, right? And his journey, right? He's on whatever planet he's on. I'm not the Star Wars nerd that knows the name of the planet. My kids would know that, but he goes from whatever that planet is, and he goes on his journey, right? That's the actual journey. That's the road of trials that he goes on. And it's here in the road of trials that we find allies. And you find allies on your road of trials to help you along the way. Christy has been one of my allies big time in my life. For the last 6, 7, 8 years, I don't even know how long it's been, she's been an ally of mine. My wife is an ally. This is in the road of trials where we collect our allies. Now, here's what's interesting. What does brain want to do today when it comes to connecting with people? You'd think it'd crave it, right? 2 years we've been told not to really connect. You come into an environment like this, we're connecting. How many of you have missed hugs over the last 2 years? You've missed face-to-face. Yesterday was the first time I've been in the airport in 2.5 years where people weren't wearing masks. We got to see their faces. I was talking to a woman this weekend, and she said, yeah, my daughter is 1.5 years. She's only known people with masks. I was like, I wonder what that's going to do to people. That's pretty interesting, right? But think about connection. Brain, you're loving it, right? Because you have to do your work because I keep moving forward and back. People that are running the cameras always love me. They're like, seriously, do you have to do that? You have to walk this way? It's my own nervousness, right? And I'm watching my feet the whole time. So, where was I? Squirrel. Protection. Our brain wants to protect ourselves, right? Our brain wants to protect, and its version of protection is usually isolation. It's not connection. So we have to, our nervous systems have to connect with people. They have to resource with people. If we don't resource with people, what do? We resource with things. How many of you have resourced with things over the last couple of years? How many of you, your community the last couple of years has been the characters on Schitt's Creek? Right? I know listen, I'm in my 6th time through, right? I get it. My wife doesn't know this, but I'm one day will, I'm reached out to all these Schitt's Creek characters, and one day we were going to have this these people at our home. That's my community.
Can you invite all of us? Yeah.
Well, I'll invite you guys. Yes, for sure. Yes. But that's been our community. It's because brain likes to isolate. What are the ways that you've protected yourself over the last couple of years? Netflix, wine. How do you isolate? How do you disconnect instead of connect in? Instead of resource with other people. And again, our society has told us not to for the last 2 years. So that's been a challenge. Looking at your phone. That's the craziest thing. Like, we think focus is a good thing, but it's when we focus on something for too long, it actually creates anxiety, right? That exercise that Amanda gave you earlier where you have that peripheral vision, that helps anxiety so much. When you're focused on something for too long, there's this massive anxiety, and we're wondering why there's a 58% increase in anxiety with kids under 18. In 2 years. Like, that's 2 years, 58% increase. And you think about that focus on our phones. How else? How else do you guys isolate? Through work, something you can control, right? Because you're married to a very strong woman, which you come home to, and that's not the easiest thing to control, so you do something you can control, right? Yeah, she wants you to show up in your masculinity and be empathetic at the same time. Like, she wants you to ride in on the horse without the reins, in the water. You're gonna have to grow your hair out a little bit, right? So that's how she wants you to come in at work, and you're like, oh man, now I'm coming into an environment I can't control. Yeah, interesting. So brain wants to protect us. It does what it does what it can control, which is isolate. So are you guys up for an exercise where you connect in? Some people are shaking their head. Some people are like, I'm in. Okay, so let's do this. I want you to write down something that you absolutely would love to hear from yourself. You'd love to hear it from yourself, and you'd love to believe it. Like, what's something you'd love to hear from yourself and really believe it? Is it, I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I'm a badass? What is it? I have a nice butt? I don't know. What would you love to hear from yourself and believe it? And don't try to create the perfect thing. Just come up with something. Like, I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I'm amazing, I'm awesome. What if you woke up every morning and looked in the mirror and went, awesome? Like, you would squash the beauty industry. There would not be one. So what would you love to hear? What would you love to hear and believe? What would that be? And I want you to write it down because we're going to use it. You're going to use it in just a second. And let me hear some examples. What you would love to hear and believe.
I am enough.
I am enough. Okay, cool. What else? I'm worthy. Yeah. Man, that's a big one. I can create powerful change in my life. Okay?
I belong just the way I am.
I belong just the way I am. Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to separate the room, and I'm going to have half of you close your eyes in a minute when I tell you, and I'm going to have the other half, you're going to go whisper in the ears of as many people as possible, right? You're going to connect that thing you just wrote down. Now, you're going to not reverse it, but you're going to use the you part of it. So in other words, you're not going to whisper in somebody's ear, I am an amazing power. Because what are they going to say? Good for you. You're going to say you are an amazing power. And think about it. How many of you just had something come up, you're like, I'm going to whisper in somebody's ear? Like, is that totally opposite than what we've been told to do for the last 2 years? And I'm telling you to go whisper in somebody's ear, and you're like, oh, that's scary. Like, notice some of the fear that comes up. And you're going to go whisper in somebody else's ear, the very thing you want to hear, only going to turn it into you are. So does everybody get this? So it's not I am amazing, you are amazing. It's not I am the greatest gift in the world. It's you are the greatest gift in the world. Are you guys ready for this? So we'll split the room right down the middle, and we'll have half the room close your eyes, and we'll have the other half you're going to go whisper to as many people as possible. Are we clear? Are you good? Okay. So let's have you guys on this side close your eyes. So just put everything away for a minute. If you have to move yourself around so you make yourself accessible. Yes?
I cannot hear out of my left ear. So if you whisper, whisper in my right ear.
Okay. Is everybody going to remember that? So scream in her other ear. Okay. Are you guys ready? Close your eyes. And just sit back and take a couple of deep breaths. Just a couple of deep breaths and just relax. Just relax. Take some deep breaths. Okay, you can start to head back to your seats. And just keep your eyes closed. And just soak up what you just got. Just notice it. Just notice it. Notice what your body did. Notice if it retracted or if it opened up. Notice if it softened. What happened? Just notice. Okay, now you guys close your eyes. And if you had your eyes closed before, go ahead and open them. And again, you guys just relax, take some deep breaths. Make sure you make yourself available to get to, right? Which protection brain may not want to make yourself available, so you hide out.
She literally just handed us Tic Tacs. Mom mode.
All right, you guys got your eyes closed, some deep breaths. Are you ready? Okay, you can start to head back to your chairs. Go ahead and open your eyes. What was that like? What was that like for you guys? What happened? It was beautiful. How come?
I loved giving and I loved receiving. Yeah, hence the tears.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it was it solidified what I wrote down when we wrote down about ourselves at the beginning. So it helped solidify what I already knew
Yeah.
and gave me that loving feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a very standoffish person. Personal space is a big thing for me. So the fact that you were worthy was the very first thing I heard was a big thing.
Yeah.
It kind of just like was like a little bit of let go.
So when you say you're a standoffish person, notice how that's an identity that you've created for yourself, right? And so when you walk around, what has to happen is your brain has to follow suit. The strongest form in human personality is to be consistent with the identity we create for ourselves. So if the identity you create is I'm a standoffish person, then your brain goes out and says, that's who I have to be every day. Could you be somebody different? Based on even what you were told about your face today, are you somebody different? Yeah. So you could leave today going, I'm not a standoffish person, so that means I can connect with people. Again, you got to resource, our nervous system has to resource through people. And I get it, I don't. I check out, I isolate. But I know that it's through people that my nervous system really has to resource through. So if you don't, you find things to do. Like, what do you find to do? You craft, which is creative, which is cool, but it's not people. No. Yeah, I go run, I go do things that might be, for me it used to be food. That was my thing. And then before that was drugs and alcohol. That's my go-to, right? That's where I numb out. If we don't resource through people, then we find things or places to do it. So how many of you can really connect in when things are difficult, when you're triggered, when you're like having an emotional time? How many of you reach out and ask for help? Yeah, a few of us. A few of us. Brain wants to protect. Now, here's the thing that I also know. We have a fear of judgment. We have a fear of rejection. We're only born with two fears. You know the two fears we're born with? What two fears are we born with? Only two. Fear of what? Fear of falling and spiders. Yes, I have that fear too. It's actually loud noises. Think about if those were your only two fears today. Like, where would you be in life if those were your only two fears? Later in life, we gather two other fears, and those two fears that we get later in life are, am I enough and will I be loved? And then we base our entire life around that, right? So our fear central, if you will, causes us to go into places where we fear rejection. Am I going to be enough? Am I going to be able to do what I do? Are people going to accept this? So I think about our ability to communicate our struggles, our emotional suffering, how do we become really resilient? And we're collecting allies, but how do we communicate what's really going on with us? Michelle and I have a friend who had a daughter, 5-6 years ago that committed suicide. And when we found out about that, it was like, no way, like, did we know that? Was she struggling that bad? And they're like, we didn't know. Nobody knew. How come? How come she couldn't go say, hey, I'm struggling at this level? And I don't think we have that communication, or we're willing to, because, again, there's shame around it. I have a ton of shame around anxiety. To tell you guys, I struggle with anxiety to this day a lot. Like, there's a lot of shame around that. So it's hard for me even to go to my wife and go, you know what, I'm struggling. Like, I'm having a hard time, because I feel shame. Or I feel like I might get rejected, or I feel like I might get judged, right? Especially from that square jaw that's like, suck it up. She, rub, that's the English saying, right? She's British, and if you fall down, it's get up and rub some dirt in it, right? So when I come to her and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling, I'm having such a hard time, it's like, is she gonna say, rub some dirt in it? And she doesn't say it like that, she says, rub some debt in it. So we struggle to communicate. And what I find is that it's because we have different levels of trauma. Like trauma affects us differently. We have whatever goes on out in the world come in, the field come in and affect us and trigger us. And we have different levels of trauma that we're affected by this. So I think there's 4 levels of trauma. And being able to communicate these levels of trauma are critical. Not only for other people to understand where we're at, but what we can get from our kids, what we can get from people. So levels of trauma, I'll give you an example. A level 1 trauma is where something's come in and affected you, and it's not that difficult to get back online. So I'll give you an example of brain. So here's brain, here's brainstem, here's our neocortex, here's our prefrontal cortex, and here's our amygdala. Now you guys know how these operate, right? If you don't know anything about the prefrontal cortex, how many of you have children under the age of 26 that make really, really stupid decisions sometimes? And you're like, why in the hell did you do that? Their prefrontal cortex isn't functioning, right? And it doesn't develop until they're like 26, fully. It's why I used to, at 17, drink lots of tequila, light garbage cans on fire, and then ride them down the he's like, yes, that's a good idea. There's a cemetery in the avenues in Salt Lake City. That's where we used to do it. It's perfect. Yes. No prefrontal cortex operating, right? And how many of you over the last couple of years have not had your prefrontal cortex operating and you've had conversations with people? Or you've gone on social media and posted something without your prefrontal cortex operating? Anybody do this? We've seen a world of people do this, right? So you know this prefrontal cortex is critical for us to operate. And when we go offline, our amygdala is what's activated. And you know the amygdala is the place that creates fight, flight, or freeze. So traumas come in and impact us, and they take our brains offline, and then our amygdala is activated. And there's different levels of trauma that affect us. So level 1 is today when I drove here, a truck like pulled right in front of me, like within inches. And I pulled over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I went offline for a minute, right? But it was a level 1. It wasn't that big a deal. I've used a finger or two, right, to this person. But I'm not like, oh, no big deal. Like I wasn't operating from my prefrontal cortex. I was offline. But I was able to get myself back online pretty quick. Like I'm able to take some deep breaths, and I'm like, I'm good. That's a level 1 trauma. A level 1 trauma is your brain goes offline, your amygdala is activated, but for a short time, and you yourself can get yourself back online. So I liken it to like if you had a bunch of blisters on your hand. A bunch of blisters on your hand. Like it wouldn't create this big disability. Like you don't need a tourniquet for it. Those of you that know in the health world, the tourniquet, you're probably going to use a limb if you use a tourniquet. It's to stop bleeding, like completely stop it. You don't need that for this, right? It's a level 1. Like when you go grab something, it's going to hurt, it's going to be harmful to your hand, but it's not going to debilitate you. That's a level 1. What are some level 1 traumas you guys have? Kids driving you nuts. Yeah, kids are like causing problems. You go offline, you might yell at them, you might do something that you regret later, but it's like come back online pretty quick. Yeah, what else? What are level 1s? The car doesn't start. Yes. You're offline and you're like, this car, right? Yes. But you can come back online pretty quick, right? Especially if it starts eventually. Yes. It might go to a level 2 if it keeps having the same problem throughout the day. Yes. What else? What are some level 1s? Go for it. Oh, yeah. And you know everybody's judging you. You're like, gosh, that stupid ass. Why'd they do that? Yeah. Anytime we're judged, depending on what our level of trauma is, could be a level 1. Yeah. Okay, so then there's level 2. And level 2 is not just these blisters on your hand, but it's like having we'll call it like when you roll your ankle. Anybody ever rolled their ankle? Like you totally sprained your ankle. And that's a level 2. Like you're still going to handle it yourself, but it's a lot bigger deal. It's going to hamper you a lot more than these blisters. So you're going to maybe even have to use a crutch, but you can handle it on your own. Level 2 trauma for me would be if I get into if we talk about grades with one of my kids, because one of my kids just hasn't quite figured that, interaction with school out, right? So it's like having the grade discussion. That's a level 2 for me. What are level 2s for you guys? I go offline, amygdala is activated, and it takes me a little bit longer and a little bit more to get back online. Telling kids more than once to stop. Yes. What else? What are level 2s?
Getting the phone call that the son that didn't use the prefrontal cortex just rolled the razor.
Just rolled the razor. Yes. Okay, level 2.
That's a 2.
That's a 2. All right. And you're like, great. Like insurance, like was he okay? Like, why'd you make that move? Yeah. Yeah. What's he going to do in the future? Yeah. What else?
Teaching my daughter how to drive.
How many of you?
Might be a little bit higher than a level 2.
So, how many of you have taught your kids to drive or been in the cars with them? Level 2s?
3 almost.
3 almost, yes, yeah. Level 2, right? And it takes you a little bit. And you might say some things, you're like, what do you say to them? You're like, you start freaking out, and you're like, I know this isn't helping, but it's because your amygdala is activated. Your prefrontal cortex not going, honey, you got this. It's like, oh, shit. Yes. So level 2. Level 3s are like a broken leg. How many of you are healing your own broken leg? I'm curious. You're strapping two 2x4s and some duct tape, and you're like, you're out. You're doing it. Level 3 is broken leg. We need help. That's what doctors are for, right? Doctors are to help us mend broken bones and sew things up when they need to be sewed, right? So a broken leg, you can't do it by yourself. You must resource with other people. Level 3 for me is when Michelle and I get into a really heavy fight, like I go level 3, because I have this fear of abandonment. I keep touching the mic, don't I? You're like, don't touch the mic. That's a level 1. He's having a level 3. Shit, this video. It's not going to work. I know it's not going to work. Keeps doing this. When Michelle and I get into a disagreement, it's like I go to abandonment. First place I go. Like when it gets too heavy. So I go level 3. And I got to talk to a friend, or I got to talk to her, or I got to talk to somebody. I got to talk to one of my allies. I got to go, hey, listen, I need some support here because here's what's going on. It's a level 3. It triggers me like no other. She'll be like, hey, she's over it in 10 minutes. She's like, the logical thing to do would be not to carry this around. Like I was over it hours ago, and I'm like, really? Right? Pointed chin. So that's a level 3 for me. A level 3 for me would also be if like financial stuff for me. Anything financially or business-wise, if our business isn't killing it, like that's a level 3 for me. And I get triggered and I go offline and I need support. I need help. What are level 3s for you?
Watching my son struggle every day because of his fears and anxieties.
Yeah. And I'm going to share with you in a minute why that might even be a level 4. Yeah. Divorce. Yeah. I'm going to share where that might be a level 4 for you as well. Yeah. What's a day-to-day occurrence that may show up and create a level 3 for you?
Before I had my neck operated, I couldn't sleep and I was in chronic, like everyday pain.
Oh, yeah.
Level 3.
Yeah.
I needed help. Like when I had bad days, I needed help to just finish that day.
Yeah. And it might be hard because I'm hearing maybe even some 3s that are even going to be 4s. Because here's a 4. A 4 is like having your leg amputated. It's like there's no healing. A broken leg is going to heal, an amputation's not going to heal. It has to be accepted. divorce, a death, anxiety. Like if I don't accept anxiety, I have more of it. There's a woman I see every day, she runs in the park, and she has, I call it a bionic leg. She literally has this leg that is, it's not a normal leg. It's like this titanium awesome thing, and she runs on it, and she runs farther than me, and she runs faster than me. And I know what's happened is, leg's been amputated, and she can't wake up every day and go, dang, I should have my leg. Or else she's not out running. She's got to accept something that's happened. There's no coming back from it. There's no healing it for good. So for me, I look at anxiety and I go, I'm not healing, I'm not going to completely heal from it, but I can accept it. I can manage it. And at a really high level, but when I do that and I've accepted it, now it's like, hey, I've looked down and I go, I should have my leg. I shouldn't feel anxious. I shouldn't feel this. This person still should be here. That's a level 4 trauma. Right? So my kids have never had a level 4 trauma. They will. They've had 3s. And so when my kids come to me and I can see them anxious, I go, hey, where are you at? Are you at a 1? Are you 2, 3? And they're just like, Dad, I'm just having level 1 stuff. And I'm like, cool, you got this. I might have some empathy. I might be able to talk to them. But if they're at a level 3 and they go level 3, I stop everything and go, let's lean in. Because I wonder if our friend, if her daughter could have said to her mom, I'm at a level 3. And her mom could have went, I'm flying out to where you're at today. I'll be there in a couple of hours, like I'm coming out. Whether or not, that could have done anything, I don't know, but I think we just have a hard time communicating. So being able to tell people where you're at, I'm at a level 1, 2, 3, 4. How many of you could see this would help to communicate this kind of communication with your children and your family? So you could go, hey, it's not just I feel anxious again today, but I'm at a level 3. I need to lean on you. I need to resource you. Or else I'm going to go resource alcohol or drugs, or I'm going to check out. Does this make sense? So this is something I think we have to do in the road of trials when we get others. The third path, the third step, if you will, on the hero's path is the abyss. So we've taken on the challenge. We're on the road of trials. Now we look at the abyss. And the abyss is a scary place because it's that dark cave where the unknown is. And it's like, man, you look into the abyss and you're like, I don't even know. Christy talked about the shadow. It's like looking at the shadow parts of you and looking at that part of you you don't want to look at. Because when you look in there, and that's like, think about it, that's like looking at your body, your health, your social media, your friends. Like how many of you right now, if you said tomorrow, I'm moving, how many people would show up? How many friends would show up? Because they wanted to, not out of obligation. Like that's a place I had to look at and go, how many people would? Not out of obligation, but how many friends do I have? Especially male friends. For guys, we really like to isolate, right? So the masculine loves to isolate, and when it isolates, it doesn't collect that ally or that group of people to get together and help. So the abyss is that place, that unknown you have to look at. And here's the thing, it's so scary, most of us want to avoid it, so we don't take stuff on. And this is when we get that imposter syndrome, if we try to bypass the abyss. Anybody go, I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to feel it, I don't want to have this, I just want to check out, and I don't want to go into that dark place and look at the things that I have to look at. Because if I do, it's going to be scary, it's going to be the unknown. Anybody in that space?
Would that also be considered like the dark night of the soul?
Totally, totally. The dark night of the soul. I mean, that you can have the road of trials and the abyss. You can be in the abyss for a very long time. But it's the place we have to go that says, I'm going to shoulder this. I'm going to own this. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm not going to blame or complain anymore. I'm going to take responsibility, which is hard because I think most of us fall into this place that I call the trauma triangle. And the trauma triangle is that when you make somebody or something the villain, you become the what? Yeah, right? It's like I made cancer a villain. I was like, this was this awful, horrible thing. It was a villain of mine. And I was paralyzed until I let go of that and didn't make it a villain. Because here's the thing, when you have a villain and you're the victim, you wait for the hero or the savior to come in and save the day. And sometimes the savior or the hero is the villain. And so we wait for our significant other to come in and say, I'm sorry, or whatever has to happen there. So we make people villains. How many of you made the government a villain? Yeah, I know I did in our business. I'm like, you just took all of our money. Like, we went from 9 employees to 2 overnight. We have to learn how to do virtual events. That's after I got out of victim mode. Because in victim mode, I didn't know what we were going to do. I was paralyzed. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do with our business. We go and do events. That's what we do. And then as soon as I stopped making the government the villain, I went, let's get to work and adapt and figure out a way to do it. And that's when we started doing virtual events. And I'm like, this works really well. I don't have to travel as much and go to, Lawrence, Kansas in December, or Winnipeg, Canada in January. I can actually do this at home in our studio and make a massive impact on people. That's a big deal. We adapted, but it's because I didn't make villains. How many of you make your significant other a villain at times? Especially when you get into a disagreement.
We don't disagree.
Yes. I can tell by the volcano that eventually things erupt. Now, I don't know what he does if it comes out in fight, flight, or freeze, but it erupts, right? And he's at a level 3 or 4 for sure. Yeah. So you make that person the villain. And then how are you going to connect in with them? Right? So we got to be careful in this abyss, because the trauma triangle will always show up. We can't bypass it because it's a spiritual bypass. So what do you need to take on? Like, what do you really need to dig into and take on that you don't want to? I know there's this saying that says, it's a Roman proverb that says, fate will help the willing, and those who won't, she will drag. And here's the thing. For most of my adult life, 20 years of my adult life, I was 30 to 75 pounds overweight. 30 to 75 pounds overweight. At my biggest, I think, I was about 75 to 80 pounds overweight. I didn't voluntarily take on my health. I did at times, but it always reverted back to food, and I checked out, and I didn't make it serious. When I got cancer, I was forced to deal with my illness. And then I got to my ideal weight. Like, I literally, you know what it's like to walk around with like you can feel your ab muscles? Like, that's a really cool feeling. I went most of my adult life not knowing what that felt like. But it's because I made nutrition and I made exercise not just a priority and not a to-do, but I made them protocols. So when you're in the abyss, you've got to find protocols to adapt. Protocols aren't to-dos. I'll give you an example. Who has a six-pack underneath their clothing right now? I'm curious. Who's got one that we could actually visually see? Who's got one? I'm curious. I do, and I don't say that to impress you, just so you know. But to impress upon you, at one time I did not, for a very long time. So how many of you consider yourself healthy, really healthy? Then you have, like, I know Michelle, she has healthy protocols. Like, one of Michelle's protocols is she walks every day. She lifts weights every day. It's not on her to-do list. It doesn't make her calendar. It's just a given. She does it every day. It's like brushing her teeth. It's a must. It's not a should. It's not a to-do. Because if things make your to-do, how many of you have exercise on your to-do list? Yeah. And then how much do you exercise? It used to make, I need to get to the gym 3 days a week, and it was on my to-do list. I'd wake up tired and brain and say, let me find the easiest thing out of my to-do list to do. And it's not going to take the hardest thing and do it. So protocols are musts. They're like automatic. You just do them. They're not to-dos. They are musts. Your shoulds become musts. So for me, I know for Michelle, eating sugar isn't an option. It's just not. We don't eat processed sugar. It's something we don't do. It's a must. I move every single day for at least 30 minutes, some sort of movement. I don't have to go to the gym for an hour and a half. That was on my to-do list. I just move every day for 30 minutes. It's a protocol. And a protocol is something that becomes sacred. And it's sacred because you sacrifice something and you do it more than just for yourself. You know that you vitalize the world. So if I go run every day, it's not just for me, it's I'm better for Michelle, I'm better for my clients, I'm better for everybody. So it's a sacred thing. How many of you, who's independently wealthy, financially free in this room? Anybody? Well, if you were, you would practice financial protocols. They wouldn't be options. You wouldn't think about doing financial protocols. Every day you would have a financial protocol. How many of you have mindful, you've got a mindfulness protocol that you exercise every day? Any coaches in the room or therapists? Absolutely. You have things you do every single day. They're not on your to-do list. They are protocols. They're musts. So where do you want to be a professional in your life? I have relationship protocols. I notice something about Michelle every single day. Because how often does the feminine want to be noticed? All the time. All the freaking time. So I have a protocol every day that says I notice something about Michelle every day. It's not on my to-do list. It doesn't make my calendar. It's a must. Because it's a relationship protocol. Because I want our relationship to be better and better and better. I have health protocols. I have business protocols. Things that I do every single day. They're not options. They're musts. So where in your life, if you're in the abyss, might it be because you're not practicing protocols? Principle 4, it is the transformation or the treasure. This is where your wounds become your genius. This is where your insecurities become your allies. This is where the debilitating stuff, the amputated leg, becomes the gold in your life. This is where all the hard work you did in the abyss pays off, and you bring home the treasure, or you have the transformation. This is where you get to be grateful for the biggest insecurities in your life. Do me a favor. Put down your notes for just a second and just take a couple of deep breaths and close your eyes. And I want you to put both hands over your heart and just breathe into your heart for just a moment and feel your heart. Feel it beating. And just notice the gratitude you have for your heart. Like as long as this thing beats, you live. It's a gift. It was given to you at birth. Your heart. Who is your heart loved? Who is it cared for? This heart. This beautiful tool. And just have gratitude for your heart. Underneath your breath, just say thank you. I love you. Thank you. I love you. Find a moment in your life, a moment that you could be grateful for. It doesn't matter, any moment. Pick a moment, big or small, but just a moment of gratitude. And step into that moment as if it were happening right now. See what you saw. Hear what you heard. Feel what you felt in that moment as if it were happening right now. And just feel the gratitude for that moment. It was beautiful, wasn't it? It was a blessing, that moment. Underneath your breath, say thank you. I love you. Find a second moment. And this time I want you to think about a moment that was challenging and it was hard, but you're proud of yourself for it. You overcame the challenge. There was an adversity. There was something difficult, and you took it on. You went through the challenge. You did not bypass it. And notice how proud you were of yourself for taking that on. Notice the gratitude for that moment. That was beautiful, wasn't it? Even though you didn't know how you were going to get through it or what was going to happen, you did it. You took it on. And you're proud of yourself. Now I want you to spend the next 30 seconds finding as many moments as you can that you're proud of yourself for. And think about reach out and grab them and bringing them into your heart. Moments that you were proud of, hard moments, difficult moments, struggles, adversities, challenges that you took on. And reach out and grab them and bring them into your heart. Keep reaching out and grabbing them and bringing them into your heart. Difficult moments, struggling moments, hard moments, challenging moments. Bring them into your heart. And underneath your breath, simply say, thank you. I love you. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's the gratitude you have when you go through the transformation, right? When you do the hard work. When you do the hard work, you can be proud of yourself for that. That's the transformation. Principle 5 is bringing that treasure home. What does bringing that treasure home mean? Service. You make service more important than certainty. You make contribution more important than security and comfort and safety. That's where you get to bring your genius and it gets to light other people up. That's where I get to say, hey, I went through it. I'm not the anemic life coach that I once was, that used to talk about how you needed to be disciplined, and I'm 60 pounds overweight. I'm not the anemic life coach that bypassed vulnerability and then had to someday ask for help. Today I know I went through the trials. I went into the abyss. And I can bring that to you. I can bring that treasure to you in service. So that I'm not an imposter or that I'm not a fraud. And when you go through this process, this is how you get to this place. This is how you bring the transformation home. Does that make sense? Was this helpful? Okay, there's one more thing I got to share with you guys. We're good? Okay. So I can't not leave here without talking about anxiety and how anxiety has just been on the rise for so many people. Like studies show in 2019, 11% of the population said they suffered or struggled with some sort of anxiety. 11% in 2019. Today it's 41%. And like I said, it's 58% in children under the age of 18. There's a 36% increase in sleeping disorders. There's a 32% increase in eating disorders. There's a 22% increase in substance abuse. We know there's something that's gone on over the last couple of years, right? We all know what that is, but what it's done to our psyche is crazy. So I've used, I've read thousands of books. I've been to years and years of workshops. I've worked with lots and lots of people because I have lots of allies. I collect allies, right, to help me along the way, along the road of trials. And we're having an event, a virtual event called the Anxious Brain. Now, when I say virtual event, this isn't just a Zoom call. Like, we learned how to do events virtually from the best. So we found a group called SAGE who works with the people in our industry, like the Eric Worre's, Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, that teach people and taught them how to do an event virtually. And Michelle and I spent 3 days with them learning how to do virtual events. So when we do an event, it's an event. Like, it's not a Zoom call, right? I'm not in my living room doing a Zoom call. It's a full-on event. And we have an event called the Anxious Brain. How many of you would be interested in attending this Anxious Brain event? I'm curious. Well, guess what? You guys all get a ticket to attend this absolutely free because you bought this. So were you aware of that? No. You weren't aware of that. They weren't aware of it. You're right there, Amanda. It was out there. Okay. So this is not one of those things where it's a free event. This is literally, you guys get it. Today, we're going to give you a code to use, and you have to register for it, but it's free for you. Tomorrow, it's $79 just like it is for everybody else. And then there's a VIP ticket we have in there that's $149, and you get it for half off. So the code that you'll use, and there's flyers over here that you guys can grab one, but write this code down because you're going to need to use this code. Is it thriving? So it's all capitals, thriving. Michelle only told me like 6 times. So thriving, you do need to register for it to attend, right? And I know what things like free, it's like, I want to attend one more free thing, and then I don't show up, and I don't have skin in the game. So I want you guys to know this is a paid event. It's $79, and most of our events are 3 days, and they're $197. But this is a one-day event. It's $79 for you guys because you bought this ticket is absolutely free to you. And then you get buy a VIP ticket for half off. So that's a pretty awesome gift. Okay, so let's do one more thing. If you guys could think about like all the gratitude in the world you could muster up right now. Like if you could muster all your gratitude and give gratitude to another human being. Think about that. Because this person, she thought about, how do I go serve the world? And then how do I go put my ass on the line and like get a space reserved and then try to get people here when people might not show up? They might, I don't know. Are they freaked out about COVID? Or is it going to be masks? What are we going to do? But had a vision and gathered people together and brought this to you. She had to have cared an awful lot about making a difference in the world. So if you were going to give all your gratitude that you had right now, not give it away, but give it up, and then you get to gather it right back up. But if you were going to give as much gratitude as you possibly can, what would that look like if you gave that to Amanda right now? What would that look like? I'm curious. Like, all your gratitude. What would it look like? She's right there. What would that absolutely look like? Guys, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for allowing me to come speak into you, even when I was in my head through a lot of it, right? And that's my stuff, that's my issue, that's my deal, not yours. So I don't blame you, Christy.
Maybe a little.
She totally can. She did awesome. She was like nervous about coming up. She's like, I don't do this very often. And I was like, I'm waiting for Christy to get up and be like, just totally, please, I don't want her to bomb. And she was awesome. Wasn't she? That was her first time like doing this. She was like, I'm like, damn, I don't think I can be that good. Like, plus that, and I was all in my head about things too. So thank you guys. I appreciate you bearing with me while I was in my head. It's my pleasure, and hopefully some of this stuff helped.